The Souls series has some of the most incredible areas in all of gaming, but it also has some of the worst. Last time we talked about the best areas in each Souls game, but today I want to talk about the worst area from Demon Souls all the way to Elden Ring. As always, there are timestamps for each game if you need them, and this will not be including DLC because I have another video planned for that. Starting with Demon Souls, we have 5-2, the Swamp of Sorrow, and my goodness did it bring sorrow. This one should come as no surprise. This area is a classic poison swamp and is undoubtedly the worst area in Demon Souls. Really, the thing that makes me dislike this area so much is the way the checkpoints in Demon Souls are set up. Basically, there's only one bonfire per area, so your run to the boss is the entire level. They obviously make this easier in most areas with the classic FromSoft shortcuts if you explore enough, but this area you pretty much still have to run all the way through every time, even with the shortcut. The swamp is super dark with annoying enemies left and right trying to poison you while you slowly make your way through it. The remake did add a ring that makes it to where you can walk through this normally, but I did not find this on my first playthrough, and even with the ring, it's still the worst area. You can really see how this inspired wonderful areas such as Blighttown and the Farron Keep in the future with its frustrating enemies and slowed movement, but it makes me smile knowing how much Miyazaki loves creating these areas. I know these are technically the worst areas in these games, but it really wouldn't be a proper Souls game without them. I think the pain we all endured through these areas made us closer as a community and gave us plenty of jokes to make about the games. Some people in the comments even told me these are some of their favorite areas, and while I wouldn't go that far, it still makes me happy knowing they hold a special place in all of our hearts. Moving on to Dark Souls, we have none other than the Tomb of Giants. Lost Izalith comes in a close second, but the Tomb of Giants is really the only area I absolutely dread each time I play this game. It's also one of those areas that even if you know where to go, it's still incredibly difficult to run through and makes me despise playing through the second half of this game again. I've said before that I think areas like this are BS because there's really no skill involved in the challenge. They just make it to where you can't see and throw a bunch of terrifying enemies at you. But I will say it does a good job of creating intensity because good lord, this area is scary. I think it's funny how Souls games at times can be scarier for me than actual horror games. Just try walking into a new area with 100,000 souls and let me know how that goes. I think the justification for the Tomb of Giants was supposed to be the fact that you can get the skull lantern or the sunlight maggot to help light your way, but they didn't really help that much. They help a lot in comparison to the darkness, but overall, not really. This area almost feels designed to be sprinted through, and that fact alone would be enough for me to give it the worst spot. Luckily, it does have another bonfire before you have to fight Nito, but I still hate the fact that you have to run through the second part of this area every time you die to the boss. I think in theory this area could have been interesting, but it was clearly rushed and it's not even bad in a good way like Blighttown. Next up we have Dark Souls 2. I'm not gonna lie, this one was tough because this game has some horrific areas. And while I was tempted to crown the Black Gulch as the worst area in this game, I think it has to go to the Shrine of Amana. The Black Gulch only escaped this spot for me because it was pretty short and it does have an extra bonfire if you use the Fragrant Branch of Yore. The Shrine of Amana, on the other hand, is pretty much a culmination of everything Dark Souls 2 did wrong. The enemy placements, the magic spam that tracks your movement, the water that sinks you unless you're paying attention to every excruciating detail of the ground. This place is a nightmare. They even have a cave section with enemies who spray mist that breaks all of your equipment. The ultimate get good moment. And unfortunately, Dark Souls 2 does this type of stuff a lot, and I still love the game, but the amount of areas I run straight through on subsequent playthroughs is absurd. When I did my first playthrough of this game a couple years ago, I was determined to kill every enemy in every area of every game. This area was by far the most frustrating for me as someone who just wanted to play through the level normally instead of running through it. And even trying to run through it now for this gameplay alone was such a pain, I ended up recording it on 3 separate days because of how annoyed I was getting. I'm really not a fan of areas that have random hidden death spots if you accidentally step on them, and I know you can just use a torch or pay closer attention, but it's hard to stare at the ground with 50 mages shooting magic at you. The only redeeming factor is if you're using magic, it's not horrible, but I really don't think that should be a prerequisite for an area to be halfway bearable. I don't think this choice will be a surprise to anyone, and I think we all know which area I'm gonna choose when I talk about the DLCs. Moving on to the amazing Bloodborne. Y'all are gonna destroy me in the comments, but it's the fishing hamlet. Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. It's the Nightmare of Mensis. Whew, I know everyone was so ready to unclick the sub button right there. Anyway, this area's name didn't lie because the Nightmare of Mensis is indeed an absolute nightmare. And with a name like Bloodborne, I don't even want to know what they meant by the word of Mensis. Ew. This area is basically a speed run while you slowly take damage and frenzy buildup, and not to mention some super frustrating enemies along the way. Luckily, you can get past this part pretty quickly, but only to reach a gigantic spider gank reminiscent of my college dorm bathroom. Other than that, this area really isn't horrible, which proves how solid of a game Bloodborne is overall, but it's definitely one of the weaker ones. I do appreciate the actual level design though, with the cages and shortcuts. These definitely made it a much more interesting area, and I do think it's pretty fitting for the atmosphere of the late game. But the boss is where my criticism continues, because good lord, this guy sucks. It's so frustrating too, because I love the one-on-one fights with humanoid enemies in this series, and when you actually get to fight him, he's not that bad, but chasing him around in circles is such a pain in the ass, even if you know where to go. And I know there's gonna be someone that's like, oh, well, you know you can cheese him with poison, right? Yeah, bro, I'm not playing these games to cheese my way through. I want to have an enjoyable fight and feel rewarded at the end. I think the other areas on this list make the Nightmare of Mensis look pretty good in comparison, but it's still a bit of a chore to get through. Next up, we have the game with my least favorite areas overall, Dark Souls 3. They snapped on those DLC areas though, those are so good. The worst area in Dark Souls 3 was a pretty easy choice for me, the Farron Keep. Not only is it another poison swamp, it's also home to some of the most difficult early game enemies in the series. And the difficulty of this area is fine, I just think it's a boring area because not only is it very dull and gray, it also takes forever to get through due to the poison slowing you down. Normally this wouldn't be that bad, but it's the fact that you have to light the fires while giant enemies that are way faster than you chase you down. And did I mention they have magic? This makes the area much worse since you no longer have the option of just running through it, you have to actually go light all the fires to progress in the game. The absolutely only redeeming factor of this area is the boss. The Abyss Watchers are one of my favorite bosses in the series and definitely attributed to my first click moment with Dark Souls. Other than that, the enemies are difficult but in a really obnoxious way that makes me not want to bother with them. On the bright side, I don't think this area is too difficult overall if you know what you're doing, but let's be honest, most of the areas in Dark Souls 3 aren't too hard. Moving on to Sekiro, while I don't think they have too many horrible areas in this game, the Sunken Valley Passage was probably my least favorite. My main gripe is that there are just so many enemies shooting at you at once, it gets really annoying. And not to mention they're shooting at you with guns. I know you can grapple up to them, but that just feels kind of cheap that they give that many enemies ranged weapons and you have to take them out one by one. It's not like they're that hard, it's just unpleasant. And when you actually do fight the enemies, you can take them out in like 2 hits with no deflecting, so the whole give and take rhythm system when fighting enemies in this game just kind of goes out the window. The Snake Eyes mini boss here was one of my least favorites as well, just because it had like 3 attacks total and basically just spammed the kick move over and over. I will say I like how much there is to find in this area, and I do appreciate any area that has hidden spots or paths, especially with how much more rare they are to find in Sekiro. Overall though, I really don't hate this area, it just felt like you got spammed with a lot of annoying ranged attacks constantly without requiring much skill from the player aside from being able to run away. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Elden Ring. I want absolutely no debate on this. The worst area in this game is without a doubt the Lake of Rot. People tried to argue this in my comments when I ranked the Elden Ring areas in my shorts videos, but I'm sorry, there's no reason you can give me for why this area could rank any higher than dead last. You know how poison swamps slowly drain your health and we don't like that? The Lake of Rot gives you Scarlet Rot pretty much instantly, and it also drains your health so fast that you either need to make sure you have a bunch of preserving boluses, a spell, or tons of heals. I do think this area is cool, and like I said before, it wouldn't have been a proper FromSoftware game without at least one horrendous poison toxic area. I really just despise the fact that if you want to actually find all the items here and kill all the enemies, you're gonna have to accept a few guaranteed deaths unless you want to waste all your resources, because you're not gonna have enough heals to last you all the way through. I'm always okay with death as a learning mechanic, but not with death as an inevitable thing regardless of your knowledge or skill level. Overall, it's just not a fun area, but we knew something like this was coming to Elden Ring, and I'm not gonna lie, I got kind of excited when I saw it for the first time. Also, a lot of people have been mad because I don't do outros.